If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order.
Interesting how they all marched in perfect lockstep while chanting the same slogans.
This pandemic has provided an opportunity.
Here we are now with an economy in crisis, but with an incredible opportunity.
It's certainly a major crisis, but it also offers us a unique opportunity.
Unprecedented opportunity to rethink and reset.
The great opportunity for reset.
Opportunity for us to reset.
For a reset.
It's almost as if they all attended the same school of thought and studied under the same professor.
Some people would say this revolution is characterized by the fight of robots against human beings. And we will win this fight.
The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen. It depends on you.
And the time to act is now.
So tonight I hope to show you all that as we deal with the continued chaos, the real agenda just simply rolls on. In fact, the chaos is directly tied to this overall plan. They are inextricably linked. And so, let's set the stage with a piece by Michael Snyder. At this point, nobody can deny that we are a society in decline. In America today, you can buy a U.S. senator for $10,000, and we'll get to that story in a little bit. However, he goes on to say that test scores for 13-year-olds have dropped to alarmingly low levels, and the CDC is telling us that more people than ever are getting depressed. Our streets are filled with crime, the ranks of homeless are absolutely surging, and we are facing the worst drug crisis in the entire history of our nation. Meanwhile, corruption is seemingly everywhere. The guy in the White House and his son have made millions of dollars in an epic influence peddling scheme that stretched over many, many years. And the mainstream media doesn't seem to care. Of course, they know exactly what it's like to be bought and paid for, because the only reason the big news networks can survive is because of the millions of advertising dollars that the pharmaceutical industry continues to inject into their dying carcasses. As Victor Davis Hanson has astutely observed, the United States was once experiencing a gradual decline, but now the fall of our nation has accelerated at such an astonishing rate that we can scarcely recognize our own country. 21st century America was on a trajectory of gradual decline, they say, until it began to implode. And yeah, that's the whole point of this video. It began to implode, however that's by design. So, was the accelerant to this implosion the COVID-19 pandemic and the unhinged lockdowns? Or was the catalyst the woke revolution fueled by the 2020 summer of exempted rioting, looting, arson, and violence? Or was it perhaps the deranged fixation on removing Donald Trump from the presidency and destroying the rule of law in the process? Or was it all that and more? Now with Joe Biden in control, the implosion has been fast-tracked. and I wish what he was saying wasn't true, but it is. For example, just a few years ago, organized looting was something that was fairly uncommon. Sadly, now we have reached a point where groups of people are constantly storming into our major retailers, grabbing whatever they want, and then storming out. Yes, the riots of 2020 were a real turning point, and retail theft hit $100 billion for the first time in 2022. Now, I bring this up because it has widespread ramifications. You can see the foundation of our society eroding right before our very eyes. Unfortunately, most of our politicians don't seem interested in solving any of these crises. Instead of working hard to fix our growing problems, our politicians are busy working hard to win their next election. And for most of them, that means making appearances in the quote-unquote pride parades that are taking place all across America. And it's not just politicians though. Lockheed Martin got in on the fun. And this is a case of when memes become reality. Yes, they will just paint their bombs rainbow color, and now everyone's on board with forever wars. So there is absolutely no doubt about where the financial capital of the world stands, or of course where these morally void politicians stand for that matter. Yes, they blanket themselves with virtue so people ignore the destruction of the world around them. However, really, nobody seems to care, because this is what we have become as a nation. And so I'll ask you a question. If we were given another 20 or 30 years, what would our society look like? Well, I'll tell you. As a common thread within this channel, and all of my videos really, I believe the chaos we are witnessing has to do with the Great Reset. So, this just happened. Do you remember when the Great Reset was first announced back in 2020? They had King Charles usher in the global agenda, and now they just had him initiate the doomsday climate clock, with of course a countdown to 2030.
2, 1.
King Charles helped turn on a climate clock at a summit in London this afternoon. It triggers 150 similar clocks across the major cities of the UK, counting down the seconds to 2030, the estimated deadline for limiting climate change to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. But the UK's climate watchdog had a stern warning for the government today. The Climate Change Committee said it's confident that the government would meet its own legally binding targets for cutting emissions by the end of the decade had fallen markedly.
But hey, why don't you tell me again how the Great Reset and Agenda 2030 are just conspiracy theories? There is a plan in place to set the world on a particular trajectory, this fourth industrial revolution, this new global paradigm. And it has been in the works for a long, long time. Now, you've probably noticed, but a common trope among the NPCs is to laugh about the idea of global government, despite numerous papers, speeches, and outlines detailing this exact plan. They are moving closer and closer to achieving this in slow, incremental steps. For example, Emmanuel Macron calls for a new international taxation on top of the current taxes to finance climate efforts. Oh, okay, so what you're saying is the result is going to be kind of like an overarching global government that collects taxes. And you've also might have heard that Joe Biden also calls for this global corporate tax. It's the same plan, the same result, which is diminishing national sovereignty. However, there's a bit more to talk about though. I'm just going to play a clip with a translation of what Macron said. Listen closely, because then I need you to verify what the hell he's talking about.
You'll agree with me that an international tax is international when it's adopted by all, and there are international taxes like socialism formally. It doesn't work in just one country. And so we're already at the technological front. We're not going to continue to beat ourselves alone. We're going to try and rally and get others to follow. So we're in favor of an international tax on shipping because it's a sector that's not taxed. There's no reason why it's not taxed and doesn't contribute to efforts throughout the world.
So, in that clip he says, international tax. We already have an international tax, like socialism formally, but it doesn't work when it's just one individual country. And as stated, he wants everyone in the world to agree to this. So, it's a failed socialist policy when done by individual countries. However, we need a global socialist policy, and if we have that, well, it's gonna work this time. Am I getting that right? Now, if you also notice the background there, a new global financial pact it says, at a climate change meeting. Well, that's because economics and climate change go together. Their plan is an economic one, an economic plan that cedes power from the individual to global corporations. As we have talked about many times, carbon markets, carbon offsetting, which just means that rich people can continue to live like they do right now. They just have to pay a fee to the government to offset their emissions. Ah, yes, that's right, freedom is for the elite only. Oh yeah, that's not all. What other schemes are in place to solve this climate crisis? while that is manipulating your behavior via social credit scores. And by the way, none of this is going to change the damn climate. It's all about money, greed, it's a scam. Now, recently, a UK citizen broke down the net zero plan perfectly at a city council meeting.
I've been a supporter of green energy and a keen environmentalist since my 20s. My office is solar powered, so I was mortified to discover that a single lithium mine causes millions of tons of waste every year laced with sulfuric acid and radioactive uranium, polluting the water supply for 300 years, not to mention the unacceptable human costs with child labour to mine cobalt. When I researched which solar panel to purchase, I did not for 1 minute consider it would be made by people trapped in razor wire enclosed labour camps, being exposed to large quantities of quartz dust which causes silicosis. Please note that the Ethical Consumer Organisation report that it is hard to avoid forced labour in the solar panel supply chain. Wind turbines, which last about 20 years, consume a colossal amount of resources and energy to manufacture and install, not to mention the blight and bird kill. They require diesel engines to start them up and then gallons of oil to lubricate, and they can't readily be recycled. Solar panels are also extremely difficult to recycle, costing more than the production of the panel. And lithium batteries pose steep challenges too. Add to that the human suffering, which we've all unwittingly been part of just by owning a laptop or mobile phone, which is minimal compared to what's required for an EV or solar farm. These so-called green or ethical solutions aren't solutions at all. Just very good marketing from the $1.5 trillion a year climate change industry. That's $4 billion a day, by the way. None of us can undo what's already been done, but what we can all do is make sure this doesn't escalate exponentially with fleets of unnecessary EVs and acres of solar farms eating up our precious farmland.
Yeah, this is one of the most interesting parts to me. I think truly these people in charge of local municipalities never even consider this. They just follow marching orders from the top. It's crazy to me that they haven't, but when you look around, you begin to notice that most people never go deeper than the main surface messaging. Remember, trust the experts, trust the science. Now it is true, the green agenda does in fact revolve around green, but in this case that simply means money. The climate change agenda nets $1.5 trillion a year, which is $4 billion a day. So, what's it going to take for people to realize the true ulterior motives? I don't know, it just seems so obvious to some of us. Oh, and guess what? China's hosting Summer Davos right now, which is just perfect considering Bill Gates was just there scheming with Xi Jinping, and also considering how much Klaus Schwab loves China.
The World Economic Forum has been involved in China since 1979, and we have been part of the development of this country now for nearly 30 years.
I respect China's achievements, which are tremendous over the last over 40 years. I think it's a role model for many countries. The Chinese model is certainly a very attractive model for quite a number of countries.
We have been part of the development of this country now for nearly 30 years.
Now, Klaus Schwab even gave a speech praising China for implementing new COVID control measures. Yes, they are still not going to let that go. One delegate at the Summer Davos event said in a statement that they cannot wait for the wine to start flowing, because that's when the real money starts to flow, end of quote. Aha, yeah, so getting hammered and partaking in some corruption. Very cool, very cool. Again, this stuff is all about greed and power. It is time for people to wake up to that fact. Stop falling for the messaging. Greed makes the world go round. However, let's detail some history, and then I have a bunch of stories that suggest everything is related to this overall agenda. So you've heard me try to follow this plan all the way back to Woodrow Wilson and Colonel Mandel House, the League of Nations, and the formation of the UN. However, let's just begin with the 1970s. It is interesting that the petrodollar and the Limits to Growth report, which as we talked about many times, led to Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030. Well, the petrodollar and this world transition date for this new world order, 2030, well, they were both conceived in the early 1970s. And so this alludes to the possibility that this was all planned. What are the odds that the plan to initiate an economic transition, a plan to have the West maintain global control by switching to a carbon-based economy by 2030, and the dissolution of the gold standard, the intro to the petrodollar, were all formed in the same time period? A coincidence? I think not. And so to add to that, a core tenet of the Limits to Growth report is population control. And guess what? As the economic transition was being planned, a seed was being placed within our subconscious. Yes, in 1970, biologist Paul Ehrlich predicted an utter breakdown of the capacity of the planet to support humanity. And by 1985, he was influencing mass sterilization efforts in India. He was influencing China's one-child policy. And of course, other population control measures.
We had formed an organization called Zero Population Growth. And then Johnny took me on The Tonight Show.
Would you welcome Dr. Paul Ehrlich?
You have to get the death rate and birth rate in balance, and there's only two ways to do it. One is to bring the birth rate down, the other is to push the death rate up.
I did the show maybe 20 times, and we went from 6 chapters and 600 members to 600 chapters and 60,000 members.
We're starting in now. This is the first step.
The Bagleys belong to a growing number of young marrieds who favor ZPG, Zero Population Growth.
How many children do you have? 2. I have 2 children.
Ehrlich's views on how to bring the birth rate down were concrete. Compulsion if voluntary methods fail. Creating a blacklist of people, companies, and organizations impeding population control in the U.S. Responsibility prizes for childless marriages. A tax on children. And a luxury tax on diapers and cribs.
The concerns about population became misanthropic. And it was taken with so much seriousness that Paul Ehrlich could recommend things like putting stuff in public water that would make people not as fertile.
Panic is not too strong a word to use for some of the advocates that I referred to as true believers.
It was a zeitgeist that was taking shape.
Attention, all citizens. Childbearing is herewith forbidden.
One of the things about zeitgeist is they have astonishing durability.
It appears that large families are on the way out, and ZPG may be possible.
The idea also took hold in the developing world, where governments like India's had already begun to embrace population control.
The core message of the book, population growth outstripping food supply, resonated quite a bit with India's elites, with the middle classes. They much preferred to believe that the poor were poor because of too many children, rather than being poor because of an unfair and unequal economic system.
If you start with that problem definition, then it's almost inevitable that there will be circumstances where governments and other actors will act in a way that is coercive.
In the mid-1970s, the Indian government began a controversial effort to encourage mass sterilization.
We do want to create an atmosphere in which people realize the importance of this program.
It led to abuses. Access to food aid and housing were sometimes used as coercion. Others weren't even given a choice.
More than 8 million sterilizations were performed, many forcibly. The people, in the words of one family planning expert, were treated like cattle.
Several days ago, crowds formed to protest being sterilized. The police opened fire and killed at least 50 of them.
Zero population growth is a tragic frame in the sense that it was assumed that there was no way out, that people would just go on reproducing until there really was a desperate circumstance in the world.
Ehrlich's message could be summed up in a dramatic prediction.
Sometime in the next 15 years, the end will come. And by the end, I mean an utter breakdown of the capacity of the planet to support humanity.
Again, as this economic transition was being planned, the quote-unquote population bomb was being published. All of this was taking place at the same exact time. This convergence of ideologically driven madness is what's driving our modern-day chaos. And really, that was new to me. I had no idea the quote-unquote population bomb led to the sterilization of 8 million Indians. It's insane. However, what's really crazy to me is this prediction of setting up this new world order by 2030. How did they possibly get this date correct? Now, the reason I ask is because they've been planning this economic transition ever since the dissolution of the gold standard, as I said. However, the main aspect of this transition is technocratic control over the global population. And so, how could they have possibly known that this technology needed to do this would be available by 2020? It is truly incredible when you think about it. The reason I say that is because the tech that underpins this entire plan is digital ID systems. Yes, this tech in the wrong hands will result in the worst totalitarian regime in history. That is, when and if it's going to be used in nefarious ways. Which, of course, they're going to use it in nefarious ways. The whole point is to manipulate behavior.
You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors.
It's all a part of a social engineering agenda, and each aspect of this broader agenda is entirely dependent upon digital ID. So, Yuval Harari likes to give an example from North Korea.
The power to hack human beings can of course be used for good purposes, like providing much better healthcare. But if this power falls into the hands of a 21st century Stalin, the result will be the worst totalitarian regime in human history, and we already have a number of applicants for the job of 21st century Stalin. Just imagine North Korea in 20 years, when everybody has to wear a biometric bracelet which constantly monitors your blood pressure, your heart rate, your brain activity, 24 hours a day. You listen to a speech on the radio by the great leader, and they know what you actually feel. You can clap your hands and smile, but if you're angry, they know you'll be in the gulag tomorrow morning.
So I guess the government can read your emotions and punish you in real time. Very, very cool. What could go wrong? Oh yeah, I forgot. Everything can and will, in fact, go wrong. Anyway, they have a multifaceted marketing campaign to sell this to the public. You know, they have a problem, the polycrisis of doom, or as George Soros calls it, the crisis of everything. And yes, they really do call it that. So this problem must be addressed, or as they say, it's the end of humanity as we know it. And they have a solution, but there needs to be a bridge connecting the problem to the solution. And that bridge is, of course, digital ID. All they need is this mechanism to manage the new system. For example, we have digital ID for climate, to track individual carbon footprints and prove climate refugee status. What about digital ID for medical reasons? Oh yeah, to mandate health passports leading to mass compliance while providing the digital framework for surveillance.
COVID is critical because this is what convinces people to accept, to legitimize total biometric surveillance. If we want to stop this epidemic, we need not just to monitor people, we need to monitor what's happening under their skin. What we have seen so far, it's corporations and governments collecting data about where we go, who we meet, what movies we watch. The next phase is the surveillance going under our skin. We're now seeing mass surveillance systems established even in democratic countries, which previously rejected them. And we also see a change in the nature of surveillance. Previously, surveillance was mainly above the skin. Now it's going under the skin. Governments want to know not just where we go or who we meet. Above all, they want to know what is happening under our skin. What's our body temperature? What's our blood pressure? What is our medical condition? COVID is critical because this is what convinces people to accept, to legitimize total biometric surveillance.
And of course, this also applies to CBDCs and cybersecurity. Yes, they want to even use that to create a passport to the metaverse. Now, this is going to be their main pitch. It's going to make your life easier. That's right, convenience. And it might actually make your life easier, however, you will not have freedom of choice. A steep trade-off, don't you think? And well, the thing is that a digital identity encompasses everything that makes you unique in the digital realm. It is a system that can even consolidate all of your most personal intimate data, including which websites you visit, your online purchases, health records, financial accounts, and who you're friends with on social media. And that's not all. Once they have that overall profile about you built, the system can also be used to determine what products, services, and information are available to you, and conversely, what is not available to you, i.e., social credits. For an example of this, we have a quote from the World Economic Forum, and it's very deliberate. And I quote, "This digital identity determines what products, services, and information we can access, or conversely, what is closed off to us," end of quote. So, as I said, the digital ID system supports social credit systems. Yes, the World Economic Forum has bragged about its plans to control individuals for years. Over in London in March 2018, Yuval Harari, the chief advisor to Klaus Schwab, explained that in this very near future, technology would be a new tool for discrimination, not against groups, but instead against individuals. And I quote, "An age of algorithms and technology that could see us transformed into superhumans with godlike qualities," end of quote.
Hacking organisms, elites may gain the power to re-engineer the future of life itself. Because once you can hack something, you can usually also engineer it.
Natural selection is replaced by intelligent design. The era of inorganic life is now beginning.
In the coming decades, AI and biotechnology will give us godlike abilities to re-engineer life and even to create completely new life forms. We are about to enter a new era of inorganic life shaped by intelligent design. Our intelligent design. The question is what kind of gods we will be. Will we be merciful and wise gods, or will we be petty, vengeful, and irresponsible gods?
And so he goes on to explain, in the 20th century, discrimination was used against entire groups based on various biases. It was fixable. However, because those biases were not actual, and victims could join together and take political action. However, in the coming years and decades, Mr. Harari said, and I quote, "We will face individual discrimination, and it might actually be based on a good assessment of who you are," end of quote. If algorithms employed by a company look up your Facebook profile or your DNA, and trawl through school and professional records, they could figure out pretty accurately who you are. And I quote, "You will not be able to do anything about this discrimination, first of all, because it's just you. In the future, they will not discriminate against you for being Jewish or gay, but because you are you. And the worst thing is that it will be true. It sounds funny, but it's terrible," end of quote. And holy shit, I actually agree with Yuval Harari. It will certainly be terrible. However, I wish I could ask this guy a few questions. If you warn about these terrible dystopian policies, and then at the same time act as Klaus Schwab's advisor, actively implementing these same dystopian policies, and so, Yuval Harari, what does that make you? Well, the World Economic Forum's digital identity scheme has been laying the foundation for a global social credit system that will give globalists the power to control citizens and punish those they deem to be quote-unquote untrustworthy. Banks will take individual social behavior, both online and offline, into account in the crediting process. This is now called alternative credit scoring, which leverages big data to analyze financial histories and social behaviors. Ah yes, so the China system, that is exactly how it works. And so with that basis established, we have a recent story. And I quote, "Barack Obama is pushing digital fingerprints to punish quote-unquote misinformation, and it's all a part of the same scheme. The same system that will determine what is truth will also be used to target those who are sharing dissenting material online. And it is all tied into the concept of social credit. Yes, it does seem that they are seeding public consciousness to this plan right now, that you could be, in fact, denied access to services based upon your political ideology or compliance with government initiatives. And so just keep in mind that Obama advanced the cause for technocracy more than any other president. It was Obama who severed the U.S. control of the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, otherwise known as ICANN, which is the repository of all Internet addresses throughout the world. Now, it is under control of international stakeholders that include the World Economic Forum and China. Now, just real quick, this push for censorship has really ramped up recently too. The UN keeps putting out things like this, and I quote, "Words are weapons." Now, excuse us while we go start World War III, right? And I quote, "This rhetoric that words can be weapons is more dangerous than hate speech itself, because it suggests that using actual weapons might be an acceptable way to combat words. It could be misconstrued to the effect that violence is an appropriate response to speech. Dangerous rhetoric to say the least, huh?" Now, okay, let's get back to the social credit thing for a second. Do you still not believe me that social credit scores are coming? Well, if that's the case, then check this out. And I quote, "The Department of Homeland Security sought to assign social credit-style risk scores to social media users." And so yeah, this was a project dubbed Night Fury. So yeah, that's always good. As I said in the beginning, the agenda rolls on behind the scenes. So in general, the main takeaway from that segment is push back against this digital ID. If we can avoid that, then we have a shot to avoid all of it. The entire dystopian technocratic scheme could fall apart, and that's because their entire infrastructure of control is based on this one aspect. So, you may be asking, what other stories do we have that signify that every nation on Earth is following the same agenda towards complete societal control? Well, let's talk about the consolidation of the food system. Now, I did have a whole video planned out on this, but I guess we can just ditch it and just go over some highlights. First up, guess what was just approved in the US? Lab-grown meats. Oh good, it comes with a side of cancer. So besides that though, this also ties into the targeting of farms, shutting them down for phony climate emission targets and taking over the food sector entirely, taking it from private to public. This is a global plan. As we all know, the Netherlands are still dealing with this problem as their government continues to work towards co-opting their land. And the Irish are going to kill 200,000 cows, probably in perpetuity, to lower nitrogen emissions. How crazy is that? Now, if you don't remember, they also said rice is dangerous. I mean, these people are going to get millions and millions and millions of people killed.
What accounts for 10% of global emissions of methane? It's not belching cows or landfills, but rice. Scientists say if the world wants to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the staple crop cannot be ignored.
Well, they're going to starve them out, I guess. Anyway, the US is slowly following suit, and Bill Gates is funding the lab-grown meat, buying up as much farmland as possible, as of course he's setting himself up to be the de facto food czar apparently. Buy up the farms, discontinue farming, federalize the land, invest in lab-grown meat, and then through eliminating competition, well, you force the world to buy his products. Surely this is going to be attached to the government as well through a public-private partnership, sharing a cut of the profits between Gates and the US government, a monopoly on food, just like they do with tech. Now, other forms of technology will be playing a major role in this new world. A few weeks ago, we talked about the future technocratic shopping experience, and how I believe that theft and crime was being allowed to increase to move forward with this plan. Yes, in that video, I was saying that more than likely they'll say to stop crime and theft, from now on you're going to have to scan biometrics to enter stores. Your biometric markers will be connected directly to your bank account. And then I gave some examples in the UK and China, and well, we have another example. Some guy on Twitter was in the UK, and he said, and I quote, "I'm trying to buy some food, so I drop into the local Aldi's, only to be told that in order to enter the store, I have to download an app and scan a QR code," end of quote. Now, you really do not want to go down the path of compliance equals food. It's amazing to me that anyone can trust the government with that much power after everything we experienced with COVID. Stop being short-sighted and think long-term. Just imagine how this progresses over 10 years. Some people never learn, I guess. Some people never learn. So the plan for digital ID to be the infrastructure for this new technocratic system will also be used to limit your ability to travel by linking your car to your ID, which of course is being done within 15-minute cities in the UK. So well, due to that, they can limit where you can go. And on that note, a new story came out last week, a plan to charge people to go downtown in cities. Yes, they are trying to call it congestion pricing. And no, it's not a joke, they just figured out a new way to extort you. Now, what they really mean is this, is that you poor people must remain in your 15-minute neighborhood. The freedom to travel is reserved for the elite class. That is all. However, that is not all. Now, we did know about this due to some speeches at Davos, but they are again moving forward with their plan behind the scenes. Pete Buttigieg just came out with another push to tax people by the mile. Now, as I said, they have all these lackeys, tyrants really, in places of power to continue pushing this plan forward, come hell or high water. For example, John Kerry's daughter is getting a job at the World Health Organization, and she was in fact a young global leader. And I quote, "World Economic Forum's young global leader, Dr. Vanessa Kerry, becomes the first ever WHO Director General Special Envoy for Climate Change and Health," end of quote. And as mentioned, Vanessa's father, John Kerry, serves as Biden's climate czar. So yes, this even transcends nepotism. It is just another puppet in a place of power to be controlled by the true architects of this new system. And so, on that note, speaking of the true architects, in a recent video by James O'Keefe, this time he got a BlackRock recruiter. And I would advise you to watch the entire video. Now the subject of this ruse already nuked his social media accounts. Anyway, in the video, he says that BlackRock decides people's fates. He also spilled some info on the company's world impact. And I quote, "It's not who is president, it's who's controlling the wallet of the president. You got $10,000, you can buy a senator." And he also said that war is really fucking good for business. So yeah, okay. Now you may be asking, should we be surprised that the entire system is based on corruption? Of course not. However, as I said, these people, these politicians, well, they're just puppets to the real architects. So just for a moment, I want to focus on the part where he says that if you have $10,000, you can buy a senator. All jokes aside, let's pool some money together and buy us some politicians. Then, you know, maybe, just maybe, we can have them actually do their jobs. I'll start a GoFundMe for buying corrupt politicians, and who knows, we might actually make some progress if we do this. Again, you should watch the entire video. We've talked about the puppets, but what about the puppet masters? There's many, but let's stick with some new information. If you haven't watched my video on George Soros and are interested in finding out more about his past, then I think you should probably check it out. However, as you might have heard, we have some new information on Soros. And I quote, George Soros is handing over control of his $25 billion empire to his son, Alexander Soros. Ah yes, a seamless transition so the destabilization can continue unhindered. So let me ask you, do you think he will end up doing even crazier shit than George? Or perhaps you think he will be less radical? Or do you think he will continue on doing what they're doing right now? Same agenda, different dude. Well, I suppose we don't really have to wonder, because he says, and I quote, "I'm more political." Yes, he said that when comparing himself to his father, George Soros. Alexander Soros has already visited the White House 14 times in just over a year and met with big-name Democrats. So Alexander Soros also says that he's going to be heavily invested in the 2024 election. Yeah, we also have rumors that he plans to self-finance a presidential campaign in 2028. So, that's always fun. He says he's going to be more political, and a Soros wants to run the entire country as president. Oh boy, let's hope that does not happen. Now, if you want to dissent from this new technocratic system, well, they have some plans to combat this. First off, Joe Biden once again threatened U.S. citizens. And I quote, President Joe Biden took another swipe at Second Amendment supporters on June 20th, reminding them that they would need an F-16 to challenge the U.S. government. First off, the dude's son just got off on a gun charge, and he wants to lecture you. I mean, you really can't make this up. Anyway, Joe Biden said this at a fundraising event at a private residence in California, and I quote, "You know, I love these guys who say the Second Amendment is, you know, the tree of liberty is watered with the blood of patriots. Well, if you want to do that, you want to work against the government, you need an F-16. You will need something more than just an AR-15, end of quote." Again, kinda seeding the public consciousness in a way. If you dissent, if you rise up against this technocratic fascist system we are implementing, well, we're just gonna bomb the shit out of you. So, I guess we can just add this to the list of things we never want to hear our president say, right? But what do you think? Is that an observation or a veiled threat? As you might know, Joe Biden made the exact same assertion back in January. And since then, his FBI and DOJ have been found targeting pro-lifers, traditional Catholics, and parents concerned about woke curriculum. Not to mention Donald Trump and many January 6 protesters. And the IRS, of all agencies, just raided a Montana gun store. And they took only gun records. And of course, they're going to add it to a federal database on U.S. gun owners. So, you know, maybe that's why Americans want to own AR-15s and other guns. No one wants to have to defend themselves against their government. However, it is a disturbing possibility that seems more likely every single day. You know, it's just not a good argument. You don't need weapons because even if you have them, we'll just kill you anyway. What an epically stupid argument. But what else could we expect from Joe Biden, right?
We have a lot of other things to cover here, but look to Dr. Sherwood. Are we moving?
Joe Biden, wake up. Joe Biden, wake up.
However, besides the threats of death, there's also one more plan in place if the masses become wise to this overall plan. Do you have a growing movement of people that want to resist tyranny? Oh, they communicate mostly through the internet, you say. Well then, let's start pushing the notion of the internet apocalypse. Which is an ominous notion considering Klaus Schwab's infamous cyber pandemic announcement.
pay insufficient attention to the frightening scenario of a comprehensive cyber attack, which would bring to a complete halt to the power supply, transportation, hospital services, our society as a whole. The COVID-19 crisis would be seen in this respect as a small disturbance in comparison to a major cyber attack.
Scientists have issued warnings about the potential impact of a solar storm, commonly referred to as a quote-unquote internet apocalypse, which could strike within the next decade. End of quote. And yeah, surely it's going to occur before the long-dreaded 2030 timeline, don't you think? However, that's not all, because we also got this. Just in, and I quote, U.S. citizens should prepare for cyber sabotage. Chinese hackers are all but certain to disrupt American critical infrastructure such as pipelines and railways or the power grid. This is in the event of a conflict with the United States, a senior U.S. cybersecurity official said, end of quote. In the end, if we get a blackout, it could be World War III, or it could be our own government. We'll just have to wait to see how things shake out. Okay, so, in the very beginning of the video, I asked if we were given another 20 or 30 years, what would our society look like? Personally, I know what we have in store for us, but you might want to start thinking about it too, because the truth is that time is running out. If we stay on this self-destructive path, the path that we are on right now, we will reach the end of the road very, very quickly. And so, let us hope for a great awakening to happen soon. Once again, this is Helio Wave. If you like the content, like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video if you want to. If you're in a position to, consider subscribing on Locals or Subscribestar. As always, make sure you disobey those true fascistas, and yes, I do hope you have a good night.